To understand what happened in those 77 days, you need to understand James Hetfield's lifelong battle with addiction and the wounds that drove him to it. James Allen Hetfield was born in 1963 in Downey, California. His childhood was marked by strict religious upbringing and emotional distance. His parents were Christian Scientists who didn't believe in medical treatment, relying instead on prayer. When his mother was diagnosed with cancer, she refused treatment. James was 16 when she died, and the loss devastated him. Music became his escape. He discovered heavy metal and found in it an outlet for the rage, pain, and confusion he couldn't express any other way. When he co-founded Metallica with Lars Ulrich in 1981, he poured everything into it, all his anger, all his heart, all his need for control and belonging. But there was something else he poured into as well: alcohol. From Metallica's earliest days, drinking was part of the culture. Late-night parties after shows, beers in the van during long drives, shots to celebrate a good performance or numb the pain of a bad one. For Hetfield, alcohol did what nothing else could. It quieted the voice in his head that told him he wasn't good enough, that success was temporary, that everyone would eventually leave him just like his mother had. By the mid-1990s, Metallica was one of the biggest bands in the world. Their self-titled album had sold over 16 million copies. They were playing stadiums, winning awards, becoming rock royalty. But Hetfield's drinking was getting worse. The more successful Metallica became, the harder it was for him to cope with the pressure, the expectations, the constant scrutiny. In 2001, everything came to a head. Hetfield had been drinking heavily for years, and the band was fracturing under the weight of unspoken resentments and unresolved conflicts. Bassist Jason Newsted had just quit. The band was trying to record a new album, but sessions were contentious and unproductive. That's when Hetfield checked himself into rehab for the first time. It was July 2001, and he was 37 years old. The band canceled tour dates, recording stopped. For several months, Metallica's future hung in the balance while Hetfield worked to get sober. When he emerged from treatment, he was different, more vulnerable, more willing to talk about his struggles. The experience became part of the documentary Some Kind of Monster, which chronicled the band's near collapse and painful rebuild. In the film, Hetfield spoke openly about his alcoholism, his fear of abandonment, his difficulty expressing emotion. "I came out and I was scared to go back into that environment," he said. The environment of touring, of performing, of being James Hetfield the rock star, instead of James Hetfield the person trying to stay sober. But he did go back, and for nearly 2 decades he managed. He stayed sober. He learned to cope with the pressures of fame without alcohol. He became an advocate for recovery, speaking openly about his journey and inspiring others who struggled with similar demons.
Metallica continued. They released albums, they toured the world. Hetfield seemed to have conquered his addiction. But addiction doesn't work that way. It's never truly conquered. It's managed day by day with constant vigilance and support. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, it comes back. By 2019, Metallica was in the middle of their worldwide tour, supporting their album Hardwired to Self-Destruct. The tour had been going on for nearly 3 years, with shows across North America, Europe, Asia, and South America. They were scheduled to head to Australia and New Zealand in October, dates that had been planned for months, with thousands of tickets sold. On the outside, everything looked fine. Hetfield was performing well, the shows were strong, but inside, he was struggling. The relentless schedule of touring, the constant travel, the pressure to perform night after night, the isolation from family, the lifestyle that made sobriety so difficult, was wearing him down. He'd been managing for 18 years, but the weight was becoming unbearable. On September 15, 2019, Metallica made an announcement that shocked the music world. The Australia and New Zealand tour dates were cancelled. All of them. Not postponed, cancelled. The statement was brief. James Hetfield has entered a treatment program to work on his recovery. We fully intend to make our way to your part of the world as soon as health and schedule permit. Fans were stunned. Metallica never canceled tours. In their nearly 40-year history, they'd powered through injuries, illnesses, and personal crises. For them to cancel an entire leg of a tour meant something was seriously wrong. The reaction on social media was immediate and intense. Some fans expressed support and understanding. Others were angry about the cancellations, complaining about travel plans and hotel bookings. But mostly, people were worried. Was Hetfield okay? Would he recover? Would Metallica continue? The media speculation was relentless. Tabloids ran stories about Hetfield's condition, his past struggles, the band's future. Metal websites published think pieces about addiction and recovery. Everyone had an opinion, but nobody really knew what was happening. Because Hetfield had disappeared. For 77 days, there were no updates, no statements, no public appearances. The man who'd been on stage performing for thousands of people just weeks earlier was completely silent. Inside the treatment facility, Hetfield was fighting the hardest battle of his life. This wasn't like 2001 when he was younger and the path forward seemed clearer. This was his third time in treatment. He was 56 years old. He'd been sober for 18 years, and he relapsed. The shame of that, the sense of failure, the fear that he'd let everyone down, it was crushing. But there was something else happening too. Perhaps for the first time in his life, Hetfield was truly confronting the root causes of his addiction. Not just managing the symptoms, but digging into the trauma, the fear, the wounds that had been driving his behavior for decades. He worked with therapists. He participated in group sessions. He talked about his mother's death, about feeling abandoned, about using control and anger and alcohol to cope with feelings he didn't know how to process. He learned that sobriety wasn't just about not drinking. It was about healing the parts of himself that had been broken for so long.
Meanwhile, the rest of Metallica waited. Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, and Robert Trujillo couldn't tour without their frontman. They couldn't make plans. All they could do was support their friend and hope he'd find his way back. The 77 days felt like an eternity, for fans waiting for news, for the band waiting for their brother, for Hetfield waiting to see if he could do this, if he could survive this, if he could come back. In early December 2019, Hetfield completed his treatment program. He was different this time. The work he'd done was deeper, more transformative than before. He wasn't just sober, he was healing. On December 13, 2019, Metallica announced that Hetfield had completed treatment and was back with the band. They would play 2 benefit concerts for their All Within My Hands Foundation at the Chase Center in San Francisco. These would be Hetfield's first performances since entering rehab. The anticipation was enormous. 20,000 people would be in the arena. Millions more would be watching online. Everyone wanted to know, would Hetfield be okay? Would he be able to perform? Would this be the beginning of Metallica's next chapter, or would it be a painful goodbye? On December 13, 2019, James Hetfield walked onto the stage at Chase Center. The crowd's roar was deafening, not just excitement, but relief, gratitude, love. They were welcoming home someone who'd been through hell and made it back. Hetfield stood at the microphone, looking out at 20,000 faces. He looked older, more worn, but also somehow more present than he'd been in years. He took a deep breath. "I'm here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm accountable, and I'm part of this family." The simplicity of those words belied their power. I'm here, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally present. I'm accountable taking ownership of his struggles and his recovery. I'm part of this family. Acknowledging that he wasn't alone, that he needed his bandmates and his fans just as much as they needed him. The crowd erupted. Many were crying. After 77 days of uncertainty, their frontman was back, and he was being honest, vulnerable, real in a way that rock stars rarely are. What followed was one of the most emotionally charged concerts in Metallica's history. Hetfield played with an intensity that came from a different place than before, not from anger or adrenaline, but from gratitude and determination. Every song felt like a declaration. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. This matters. Between songs, he spoke to the crowd about recovery, about asking for help, about the importance of vulnerability. You don't have to be tough all the time. You don't have to pretend you're okay when you're not. Asking for help is strength, not weakness. These weren't just words to fill time between songs. They were lessons he'd learned at enormous cost, and he was sharing them because he knew someone in that audience needed to hear them. The set list that night included songs that took on new meaning in the context of Hetfield's journey. Fade to Black, about suicidal thoughts and despair, became a testimony of survival. Nothing Else Matters, about vulnerability and love, became an anthem of healing. Enter Sandman, about childhood fears, became a confrontation with the demons that had haunted him for decades. When the concert ended, Hetfield stood on stage with his bandmates, Lars, Kirk, and Robert, and they embraced. 4 men who'd been through wars together, who'd almost destroyed each other, who'd held each other up when everything else fell apart. The impact of that night rippled far beyond Chase Center. Videos of Hetfield's opening words went viral. Mental health organizations shared them. Recovery groups used them. People who'd never listened to Metallica heard about what he said and were moved by it.
In a culture that often glorifies rock star excess and treats addiction as a punchline, Hetfield's honesty was revolutionary. He wasn't just admitting he had a problem, he was modeling what recovery looks like. The vulnerability, the accountability, the ongoing work of staying healthy. In interviews after his return, Hetfield spoke more openly than ever about his struggles. "Relapse doesn't mean you've failed," he said. "It means you're human. The important thing is getting back up, asking for help, and continuing the work." He also talked about how the experience changed his relationship with performing and with Metallica. "I used to think the band was everything," he said, "that if I wasn't performing, I wasn't worthy, that my value as a person was measured by how many people screamed my name. But I learned that taking care of myself, that's the most important thing. Because if I'm not healthy, there is no Metallica. And more importantly, if I'm not healthy, I'm not truly living." The honesty was refreshing in an industry that often treats vulnerability as weakness. Hetfield wasn't protecting his image or maintaining the tough guy persona. He was being real about his pain, his struggle, and his ongoing work to stay healthy. The 2019 rehab experience also deepened the bond between the band members. They'd supported each other through Cliff Burton's death, through Jason Newsted's departure, through years of touring and recording and evolving. But this was different. This was about choosing to prioritize a person over a brand, health over commerce, life over career. "James is our brother," Lars Ulrich said. "Whatever he needs, whenever he needs it, we're here. The band will wait. The tours will wait. His life can't." Hetfield's return also sparked important conversations about addiction in the music industry and beyond. For decades, the rock and roll lifestyle had glamorized excess, drinking, drugs, living hard, and dying young. But Hetfield's story offered a different narrative, that survival is more important than spectacle, that asking for help is braver than suffering in silence, that recovery is possible even after repeated relapses. Mental health organizations reported increases in people seeking help after Hetfield's story became public. Recovery groups saw more attendance. People who'd been struggling in silence found courage in his example. 3 years later, in May 2022, Hetfield would have another vulnerable moment on stage in Brazil, The breakdown that would also go viral. The moment when he admitted he felt like an old man who couldn't play anymore, and his bandmates embraced him in front of 50,000 people. That moment made sense in the context of what happened in 2019. The Brazil breakdown wasn't a one-time crisis, it was part of an ongoing journey. Hetfield wasn't fixed by rehab, he was learning to live with his struggles, to ask for help when he needed it, to be honest about his limitations. Together, these two moments, the 2019 rehab return and the 2022 Brazil breakdown, paint a picture of what real recovery looks like. Not a straight line from struggle to success, but a winding path with setbacks and triumphs, moments of strength and moments of weakness, all of it human and real. Today, James Hetfield continues to perform with Metallica. He's open about his ongoing recovery work. He attends meetings, he works with therapists, he prioritizes his mental health even when it's inconvenient for tour schedules or album releases. And he uses his platform to advocate for others who struggle. Through Metallica's All Within My Hands Foundation, the band has supported mental health initiatives and addiction recovery programs. Hetfield speaks at events about recovery and vulnerability. He answers questions from fans about how to cope with similar struggles. The 77 days James Hetfield disappeared in 2019 could have been the end of Metallica. Instead, they became the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by pretending to be invincible, but by admitting vulnerability and choosing to keep fighting anyway. When Hetfield walked back on stage that December night in San Francisco and said, "I'm here, I'm accountable, and I'm part of this family," he wasn't just announcing his return to performing, he was offering a different model of what it means to be a rock star, what it means to be strong, what it means to survive. Because sometimes the most metal thing you can do isn't playing faster or louder or harder. Sometimes it's admitting you need help. Sometimes it's choosing to live. Sometimes it's coming back after 77 days and being brave enough to say, "I'm not okay, but I'm here and I'm trying." That's the real legacy of those 77 days. Not that James Hetfield went to rehab, but that he came back, and that by coming back, by being honest, by showing his scars, he gave permission to millions of others to do the same. The demons never fully go away, but you can learn to live with them. You can ask for help. You can survive. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you can turn your survival into something that helps others survive too. That's what James Hetfield did in those 77 days. He survived, and in doing so, he showed the rest of us how.